Hello all you historians out there, and welcome to your lesson on the agricultural revolution as one of the causes of the Industrial Revolution. So this is lesson 2, located under the causes tab of the Industrial Revolution website. So last lesson we looked at a bit of an overview of all the causes of the Industrial Revolution, but now we're going to dive deeper into the agricultural revolution and how the agricultural revolution really did cause the Industrial Revolution. So your learning intention and success criteria, by the end of the lesson you need to know what the agricultural revolution is, and you need to be able to explain how the agricultural revolution allowed for the industrial revolution. Task 1 is pretty simple. You need to watch this video and write down 5 facts in your book to get your brain active and a bit thinking. Just a quick overview on the agricultural revolution. So the agricultural revolution occurred between the 17th and late 19th centuries. Refers to a time where there was unprecedented growth in agricultural industry in Britain due to the increases in labour, rising population, and land utilisation. So land utilisation also refers to the changing practices and the new practices and the new technologies involved with agriculture that caused the agricultural revolution. So these are the factors that led to the agricultural revolution. You can remember them as the acronym TIB, but these are them here. So the first one is the four-crop rotation system, the T for TIB. So during the 1730s, Charles Turnip Townshend, Turnip was his nickname, introduced the Dutch four-crop rotation system to Britain. The field was divided into 4 crops and was rotated annually. So prior to this, it was only rotated into 3. And 1 area of soil was left fallow, was left unutilised. This was to utilise and create good soil over a 4-year cycle. Clover added nitrogen to the soil, and turnips could be used as feed for livestock in winter. Now this was significant because it meant that farmers didn't have to slaughter their animals before winter. Now this video here explains it a bit more in depth as well, and the real correlation between the 4-crop rotation system and population rise. So go ahead and watch that one. But pretty much in your first year of your crop, so this is what your crop looked like. You had wheat, turnip, barley, and cloves, and then you rotated them clockwise. And you rotated them always clockwise. Again, cloves added nitrogen into the soil, which rejuvenated it, which meant that you could use your soil more often. And then you had turnips that you could feed your livestock in the winter. So that's the 4-crop rotation system, and that 4-year cycle there explained for you. Next one, we have improved methods of breeding livestock. So during the mid-1700s and early 1800s, revolutionary farmers began selective breeding of sheep and cattle so that the largest and strongest animals mated to produce the best livestock. In 1755, Robert Bakewell introduced his Leicester breed of sheep, one he created by breeding sheep for the best meat and wool production. So that's selective breeding. We're getting the most out of our animals. And next to our inventions, our 2 ploughs, really. So we've got Jethro Tull's seed drill in 1700. Jethro Tull invented the seed drill. The seed drill was a horse-drawn device that could plant 3 seeds at a time. The device worked by drilling a hole, planting the seed, and then covering the seed with soil in one motion, and it made crops 5 times larger. The Rotherham plough in 1730, Joseph Folliambi invented the Rotherham plough. This plough had an iron triangular blade. It was much lighter than the previous wooden ploughs that had to be drawn by 4 horses or oxen. The Rotherham plough only needed 2 horses to pull it. So in summary, the Rotherham plough was faster and cheaper to use. So again, an improvement on Jethro Tull's seed drill. Lastly, we have the changing perspective of farms as businesses. So as the population of Britain increased, the demand for food also increased. This placed greater importance on farmers. Before, they were seen to satisfy the needs of the surrounding people, and now they were essential for business to support trade and industry. And one thing you'll encounter when you learn about the Industrial Revolution is that when the population got high, rich people bought farms and then leased them or rented them back to the farmers who worked on them before, because they knew that farms were seen as a business, or they could be used as a business. So task 2, we've got comprehension questions. So the answers for these are all located in the notes above. So let's answer these together now. So what is the agricultural revolution? So the agricultural revolution is a time period that refers to the time when technologies and different farming practices made it easier and faster to grow food, which led to a high population increase, and people moved away from farms to towns and cities because you needed less people on farms. When did the agricultural revolution begin and end? So we'll go up to here. So we've got the 17th and late 19th centuries. So that's our beginning and end date. Number 3, we've got here. Why was the agricultural revolution essential in causing the industrial revolution? Well, essentially it supported a growing population. So the more food you can make, the more people you can have. The more people you have, the more food you actually need. Number 4, what was the 4-crop rotation system? So it was a system of rotating your 4 crops, growing different things in different years in a cycle, so that you were getting the most out of your soil and keeping your soil healthy, utilising your soil the best. Who introduced the 4-crop rotation system to Britain? That's Charles Turnip Townshend, that we can see here. Next one, what was his nickname? Turnip. That's a pretty easy one because he introduced turnips into it. In the 4-year cycle, what would you have on the bottom left of your first-year crop? So we need to go to our first-year crop. Bottom left is barley. That's our answer for number 7. Number 8, in the 4-year cycle, what would you have on the bottom left of your 3rd-year crop? So our 3rd-year crop is down here, would be turnips. Already up to number 9. In the 4-year cycle, what would you have on the bottom right of your 2nd-year crop? We would have turnips again, because it rotates clockwise, so a little bit of a tricky but a helpful for your understanding question there. Number 10, where is barley located during the 4th year of the cycle? So barley is now in the bottom right of the 4th year cycle. Number 11, who created the Leicester breed of sheep? We know that is Robert Bakewell. We learned about him just a bit before, or we read about him a bit before. How was the Leicester breed of sheep created? Well, it was made by breeding the best sheep in terms of wool and meat. So you were getting, the biggest sheep that you could use their meat and also their wool. Next here, we've got number 14. Who invented the seed drill? We've got Jethro Tull. That's a pretty easy one. Here he is there. Number 15, when was the seed drill invented? It was invented exactly 1700. Number 16, how did the seed drill work? Well, it worked by digging a hole. You can see here. The device worked by drilling a hole, planting the seed, and then covering the seed with soil. So digging the hole, planting the seed, and then covering the seed in one motion. Who invented the Rotherham plough? We've got Big Joseph Folliambi. When was it invented? It was invented in exactly 1730. Why was it better than previous wooden ploughs people used? Because it could only be pulled by 2 horses, and it was made of metal, and it was faster and cheaper to use. How did the perception of farms change before and during the Industrial Revolution? So before the Industrial Revolution, everyone lived on very small farms, and it was where you got everything from. Everything you ever ate, or everything you ever had, or everything you ever used, you made yourself on your own farm. However, when less people were on farms, people moved to cities, so there was less people on them. And when you have a growing population because you have more food, that means you need more food to sustain the new population. And so capitalists and rich people worked out that, or the wealthy capitalists worked out that farms could now be seen as businesses, and you could make a lot of money out of them. So that was how their perception changed. Task 3, guys, we have a bit of source work here. We've got 2 sources. Then task 4, we've got a pure paragraph, but we'll work on task 3 together. So source 1 is an extract from Charles Beard's book, The Industrial Revolution, published in 1919. The extract discusses agricultural land use in England during the 1760s. So let's read the source together. We'll start at the first sentence here. The first full sentence. On account of the lack of general diffusion of knowledge, improvements in fertilizing and cultivation used in some portions were unknown in others. In the South Country, the cultivation seems to have been uniformly good, while throughout the North there were great tracts of land exhausted by continued crops and ignorant tillers. So again, we don't have that crop rotation system, so they're saying that the soils are exhausted in the North. However, for more than 50 years before the Industrial Revolution, there were extensive improvements in the methods of agriculture, brought about, for the most part, by the landed gentry who had acquired a knowledge of experimental farming, and whose capital enabled them to put it into practical test. Root crops and artificial grasses were adopted to utilize fallow land and poor pastures. The introduction of rotation of crops, which we've learned about in this lesson, did away with the exhaustion of soil. Writers of this time note that the country gentleman talked about land and its properties, the benefit of certain courses, the advantage of turnip fallows, and the economies of agricultural machinery, about breeds of cattle, sheep, and pigs with the same interest with which their fathers and grandfathers used to exhibit on their subjects to the stable and kennel only. So they only talked about horses and dogs, but now they're talking about breeding cattle, sheep, and pigs for certain benefits. Next paragraph here, more than one half of the land in use was cultivated on the primitive system of common field tillage. Through the peasants' revolt and other economic forces had broken up the old manorial system, and village organisation as the centre of open field farms still existed over a large portion of the country. So mainly we have farms over a large portion of the country, open field farms. The land attached to the village was composed of arable, meadow, and pasture. So people in small villages still live near farms. So let's have a look at these questions here and answer them together now that we've read the source. Number one, is this source a primary or secondary source? Why? Well, it is a secondary source because it is made in 1919, but it's talking about agricultural practices and the things farmers discussed in the 1760s. Who made the source? We've got Charles Beard. He is the author of the book. When was the source made? Is 1919. So first three are pretty easy. Why were the crops in the south of England fertile? Let's have a look here. In the South Country, the cultivation seems to have been uniformly good, while throughout the North there were great tracts of land exhausted by. So here we've got, on account of the lack of general diffusion of knowledge, improvements in fertilizing and cultivation. So I would put improvements in fertilizing and cultivation for number 4. Why are the crops in the north of England poor and barren? Because the soil was exhausted by continued crops. So relentless, just keep planting things in the same exhausted soil, exhausts it further. And then the ignorant farmers or the ignorant tillers who weren't using these other successful practices of crop rotation and things like that. Number 6, what did the introduction of crop rotation remove? Well, it removed fallow and exhausted soil. Number 7, list 3 things men in the 1760s England talked about according to Beard. So here we go to writers in this time about the country gentleman talked about land and its properties, so that's 1. The benefit of certain courses, the advantage of turnip fallows, I'd say that's 2. And the economies of agricultural machinery, that's another one. And then I'd say for my last one, this is what I would put because I think it's the most important, breeds of cattle, sheep and pigs. That's what I'd put for number 7. Source 2, we've got a drawing of Queen Victoria visiting farming families. Made by John Coulter in 1901. Coulter followed the Queen on her trip around England. So is this a primary or secondary source? Well, it's a primary because we know that the artist who made the drawing followed the Queen, so he was there when this happened. So it's a first-hand account of the past, so it is a primary source. Who made the source? We've got John Coulter. When was the source made? 1901. Number 4, a bit of a higher order thinking question here. So the Queen of England visited farming families during the year 1900. What does this say about the importance of farming families in English society during the Industrial Revolution? So pretty much if the Queen is going to visit you, you must be pretty important and society must recognise you as fairly essential. So the fact that the Queen bothered to visit these farmers shows that people in the Industrial Revolution valued the work that farmers did and the services that they provided them with by providing everyone with food. So that's what I would put for number 4. Your last task, guys, here to meet you to be able to for this lesson is write a peel paragraph explaining this question here. Answering this question here. So explain 2 new agricultural inventions or practices during the Industrial Revolution and outline what effect they had on an advancing society. So I've given you a little bit of a structure here. If you're learning along at home or in the classroom, time yourself. You've got 7 minutes to write it. And this is your structure here. So first, explain what the Agricultural Revolution was and how it caused the Industrial Revolution. Include dates for both in brackets. Explain how new inventions and practices made farming easier and faster and how land could be utilised better. Here, explain your evidence phase. Explain how 2 new inventions or practices evolved farming practices. Explain how each worked. So that's probably going to be the longest part there. So you need to go ahead and choose 2 of these. So either crop rotation, breeding, inventions such as the seed drill or Rotherham plough, or the fact that farms were seen as businesses. And then for your links, state how both of these inventions or practices involved farming during the Industrial Revolution and what impact it had on British society. So see if you can do that in under 7 minutes, guys. And after that, if you've got time, you can click this picture here and access a Kahoot about the agricultural revolution during the Industrial Revolution. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you for our next lesson on causes of the Industrial Revolution. And remember, if you like using this website or you want to stay updated to any new lessons that are made in existing websites, make sure you go ahead and subscribe.